Hi everyone, welcome back to The Mystic in the Woods. I'm Kate, and I am so excited to have Kristen Ramezzana back on the channel today. In this interview, we talked about demons and Goetic infernals and parasitic entities, what the difference is, why people have bad experiences with the Goetic infernals, shadow work, and all kinds of other stuff. Now, Kristen Ramezzana is the CEO of the Underworld Collective. She is the host of the Awaken the Witch podcast. She is a trauma-informed shadow work coach and underworld witch. She specializes in past lives, healing the witch wound, clearing entities, and demon work. And we covered so much stuff in this interview. So I hope that you really enjoy it. You can find all of her information in the description below, and let's get into it. Okay, so to get us started, Kristen, just give us like the quick elevator pitch, the quick overview. Everybody wants to know, right? What are demons? Are they evil? And of course, if they're not evil, then why is everyone having such bad experiences with them? I shouldn't say everyone, but you've heard the stories.
Oh, yeah. So demons are just archetypes that reside within our unconscious mind. There are some people who take a very psychological approach and only view them as archetypes and not as individual beings. They are, in fact, beings. They are spirits that reside in the underworld, but they are divine darkness. So, in order to understand demons, we need to understand darkness on a spectrum. So, for example, when we look at masculine and feminine energy, we understand that there are wounded expressions of that energy and divine expressions of that energy. Now, when we see wounded masculine or feminine energy, we don't just throw out the energy completely, right? We don't just say, well, fuck that. Like, we understand that it resides on a spectrum and we can work to heal things, to shift it down that spectrum toward the divine expression of it. Darkness is much the same way. And so demons are divine darkness. They are spirits that embody the archetypes of the human shadow. And so they are masters of the shadow, and they help us so much with understanding our shadow, with owning our darkness, with stepping into our power. And they stand for radical freedom, sovereignty, empowerment. So they are very much like a choose yourself energy. And obviously we can lean too hard into that and be selfish. And especially if we have a closed heart space, like there are wounded expressions of that. There are people who work with them in a very unethical way. But most of the time when people are working with demons, they desperately need to learn how to choose themselves. They desperately need to learn how to have a backbone and say no. And that is what they help people with, because they help you own your darkness. They help you step into your power. And they, again, represent archetypes that we all embody. So when there are demons that are a little bit heavy hitting, or they can lean a little bit toward volatility, like there are people who are like, well, I'm not those things. Like, you have convinced yourself that you don't have the capacity to be those things, but we all have a shadow. And so we all have the capacity to be volatile, to be violent, to be mean. We can just choose to lean into that or not, but we can choose to meet those parts of ourselves and build trust with that part of ourselves, so that if we do have to deploy that aspect of ourselves, because again, everything serves a purpose, otherwise we wouldn't embody it in our psyche. When we meet those parts of ourselves, we essentially stop going to war with ourselves. And that's really what demons do. They help you heal the depths of your darkness so that you can feel whole, free, embodied, etc. So they are not evil, but Christianity has conditioned us to believe that they are. And so what's really interesting is when we start to look at the research of this, when we go back, there were cultures such as the ancient Egyptians who loved demons, who worshiped demons, who like held them with such reverence and respect. There were tombs and altars and crypts and things like for the Goetic infernals. And it wasn't until Christianity came about that all of a sudden possession became a thing. Like, there are no documented records of possession prior to Christianity coming about. And I have my theories on this, because Christianity, when it's become, I don't have an issue with like Jesus as an ascended master or his teachings, but like that's not what religion obviously has become. It's very vampiric, it's very fear-based. And so all of that fear has created so much energy that people have had negative experiences with. We're going to unpack that in a second. But ultimately, what's happened is when you introduce all that fear and all that manipulation, what the church really did was sever people from their own internal divinity, and demons throw you back into your own internal divinity. They allow you to lean into the fact that you are essentially a god incarnated, and that's gonna like really trigger some people, for whatever reason. We should think it's disrespectful to a god or whatever, or because you're out of the seat of your power, and that's triggering to think that there may be people who actually view themselves and their power that way. And so demons go up against everything that the church is trying to repress. The church fractures people from their own internal divinity, from their own intuition, from feeling empowered, from feeling like they can do whatever the fuck they want. And so demons essentially help you lean back into that energy. And so my theory is that the church was like, we're just going to demonize the most powerful beings and make them so afraid, because then people will not step into their power if they're afraid of being possessed or being tortured in a fiery pit of, hell and torment for all of existence. Like, what a great way to be able to control people, because demons just pierce through bullshit with absolutely radical honesty. They are so blunt. Like, whenever I take someone to meet demons, usually people are like bitch slap with truth a little bit, like their jaws on the floor, because the demons are like, you're getting in your own way. This is what you're doing. They're just very blunt. And when we speak that honestly, when we step into our power, we can't be manipulated. We can't be controlled. We don't make fear-based decisions anymore. And then people can't feed off of us. Institutions can't feed off of us. And so in my eyes, demonizing demons, making them evil, making them feared, was a great tactic to keep everybody scared of their own power and of their own darkness.
Yeah. That, which we talked about some of that in our 7 Deadly Sins real long chat, which everyone can go back and watch. It's interesting. I was listening to a podcast, I don't know, a couple weeks ago about, I think it was about angels. So it's a biblical scholarship podcast. And they didn't talk too much about demons, but basically he was saying that, like, as Christianity took hold, most of the local deities in various regions were either demoted to angels or turned into demons, because there could only be one God. So everybody got demoted in some way. So some of the angels that people that we work with used to be worshipped as deities of specific lands or specific groups of people. Just like when you start to look at, because each individual infernal has their own myth, and some of them very specifically, in quotes, used to be deities of specific, again, lands or groups of people.
Yeah.
So okay, so just give us a brief, not example, of explanation. So some people are having bad experiences because they are basically just being slapped with their own truth, right?
Well, so that's to kind of like expand upon that a little bit. There are people who approach demons in like a stupid way. If you go down there and you disrespect them, they're going to bitch slap you with some truth. If you go down there thinking that they're a fast route to like money and fame and sex and, whatever it is that you want, if you think you're going to use demons to cut corners, they're going to be like a hard stop, And so there are times where people have a bad experience because they're just not ready, or the demons will take you through a sacred initiation that absolutely rocks you. Like, if you need to learn a hard lesson, the demons have no qualms about like burning down your house to prove a point, not because they're punishing you, but it's like, if you ask for things, if you don't self-advocate, if you're on the brink of a tower moment, like they will flick you in the direction you need to be. Or if you approach them and you are arrogant or not doing what you need to do, like they again will come at you a little bit strong. And then there are people who just like can't handle that, and they're like, the demon's being mean, and it's like, no, the demon's being honest. So that's number one. Number two,
like when I tell my husband he's being mean for telling me a truth.
Yeah, right. It's like what we want to hear and what we need to hear oftentimes are not the same. Demons will never tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what you absolutely need to hear. They don't give you necessarily what you want. They give you what you need, and what you want and need become the same when you do shadow work. Like what we think we need and what we actually need sometimes are very, very different when there's dissonance between various aspects of ourselves or between our internal and external realities. But another reason why people have a bad experience with them is because, like I mentioned, they try to use them to cut corners. And so my method of working with demons facilitates the introduction of a demon in a safe way, and then allows that demon to be a master guide to take you through your unconscious mind to clear out any blocks, any fears, any self-sabotage, anything that resides within your psyche that would block you from having what you want. Because let's be real. Let's say someone wants money. If you don't have money, it's serving you in some way. There's a part of your shadow that is afraid of it, doesn't want it, thinks it's evil, like whatever the case may be. And so what I tend to find happens is when people work with demons in a very specific way that forces their hand, I'm going to get to that in a second, the demon is forced to bring the person what they're asking for. So if they ask for $50,000, the demon will bring it. But if you don't have the capacity to hold on to that, if you can't match the frequency of that, if you can't manage it well because you've never had money in your entire life, or if your shadow thinks that having that amount of money is dangerous, like if your nervous system can't handle that, if in past lives, every time you've had wealth or something terrible happened, if your soul has now created a narrative around money being dangerous or whatever, your shadow will offload it. You will fuck
Mm-hmm.
up that manifestation. And then that's when people are like, the demon's taking everything from me. The demon's taking my money. The demon's ruining my life. When it's like, no, you just didn't have the capacity to hang on to what you wanted because you cut corners. And instead of allowing the demon to help you do the dirty work of going into your shadow and clearing out those blocks and understanding those fears, understanding why you don't have what it is that you say that you want, just grabbing onto it it's almost like grabbing a beach ball. Like it's going to slip right out of your hands. The demon can bring you everything in the world, but if you can't hold on to it because you don't feel worthy, it doesn't feel safe, you will let it go. You will fuck that up, and that's not on the demon. But people, it's very easy to displace that
Yeah.
responsibility. Be like, the demon's ruining my life. The demon took my money. The demon burned down my garage. Like, the option 3 for people having a bad experience with demons is the way that they work with them. So there is a method of working with demons called Solomonic magic. For those of you who don't
Mm-hmm.
know, this was created by King Solomon. Very ancient times, this man was a very religious man, and he wanted to build a temple, and he figured out a way to summon and bind the demons to essentially force them to do whatever he wanted them to do. Now, having built a very sacred and very deep relationship with the Goetic infernals, I know that they would have helped him without him having to do that. He could have put out some tasty treats and asked if they would have helped, and they would have said yes, and it would have been great, but instead he had to bind and enslave them. And so people still use that style of magic today. And when you do it correctly, you override the demon's sovereignty, and it essentially feels like torture to them, and they are forced to do your bidding. So when someone weaponizes demons, like if you're binding demons to attack somebody else, like if you did that ritual the right way, the demon has to abide by that, and the person on the receiving end of that attack is going to have a bad time with that demon.
Yeah.
The other
Yeah.
thing that happens is when that ritual is over, when the demon's been released, it's going to be mad. And if you don't do the ritual properly and you don't successfully bind it, but you attempt to, and you kind of get the demon here, it's going to be mad. And so, like, people will oftentimes have a bad experience. And that's when they feel bitten or slapped if they're trying to like bring them up and conjure them in a
Mm-hmm.
way that's disrespectful. Or, if you're doing anything that the demon is not pleased with, there's going to be a negative repercussion, whether you feel that physically, emotionally, energetically, etc. They have a lot of power, and it's so disrespectful. Like, we wouldn't do that to an angel. We wouldn't do that to another deity. So why would we do that to these beings? And they're also like, they're demons. They lean into that darkness. So if you're afraid, they're going to fuck with you. If you summon them and you're like terrified, they're gonna lean into that a little bit because they think it's funny. If you're terrified, you shouldn't be summoning them or approaching them and asking them for anything. Like, work through your shit first. So that's a reason. And then the last reason is people think that they're having experiences with demons, but they're not. They're having
Mm-hmm.
experiences with other malevolent beings, such as vampiric spirits, parasitic entities, and the conditioning that we've all experienced from religion, from Christianity, has now instilled this fear of possession in us. It's instilled this fear of
Mm-hmm.
darkness in us. And so when we are vibrating at that frequency of fear, that actually invites other low vibrational beings to step in and weaponize that. And so when because people will come to me all the time and they're like, I had a traumatic experience in childhood and I was possessed. How could you possibly be telling people to work with demons? And I was like, you were not possessed by a demon. I would bet my life that you were not possessed by a demon, because they
Yeah.
explained the whole situation. And I'm just like, that was an entity, or that was a vampire. Like, and so people think it's demon because everything gets lumped into one box. If you've been conditioned to fear the darkness, we've been conditioned to see demons as evil because it's dark. We've been conditioned to see everything that's dark as evil. And so people
Mm-hmm.
think that anything that's not a god or an angel is a demon. It's not that simple. And so most of
Yeah.
the time, it's poor use of language or people having scary experiences with parasitic entities that are very malevolent and do override our sovereignty. And I've had extremely malevolent entities. I've experienced that inside of client clearings and things like that. There are possession symptoms. These
Mm-hmm.
things will speak through people. They'll have
Yeah.
bite marks and scratches on their. I mean, I've seen crazy shit. There's
Yeah.
never a demon present when I've witnessed stuff like that. But it's, the fear prevents people from actually turning up rocks and uncovering the truth and doing research. People don't want to touch it because they're scared. They're scared that they're going to invite something in. They're scared of what they're going to find. So they just kind of like turn a blind eye and they're like, that's demons, that's evil, I'm going to stay away from it. It's like they're not unpacking the real reason. And then we're perpetuating all of this bullshit. And sometimes that happens with really large accounts because it's clickbaity, and
Yeah.
paranormal investigators post a video and they're like, demon is haunting house. Like, demons don't haunt anything. They have way better shit to do. And so it's a lot of this is just ignorance perpetuated from religious fear.
Yeah. I talk about that a lot on the channel, the difference between or the discussion about how, dark and light are not synonyms for good and evil. And when we leave it there, not only is that inherently racist, like we are playing into an inherently racist system, it's just wildly incomplete. To just say, well, anything in the dark is bad and anything in the light is good. Like, both things can be equally divine and equally wounded. And so I just always am kind of like, I think that maybe we can accept more nuance here in this discussion than that.
Neither one exists without the other.
Right.
We would have a void then. If there was all just light, we would just be in this like void because there would be no shadows cast. It would be a void. If we had literally like all darkness, like it's not possible. They're two sides of the same coin, much like the sun and the moon. We don't say that the moon is evil just because it exists at night. Like, we understand the cyclical nature of all of this. We understand that there has to be a balance because we're meant to have duality and polarity here. That's like the way this universe was designed. That's the way it is karmically. And so when we demonize that, like we start to take that really far, and I understand that there are people that might not feel aligned to work with demons, but we have to understand that feeling disinterested, not aligned, is not the same thing as having like an extremely somatic reaction to something. So if anyone's listening to this and you're like triggered as fuck, like that's not the same thing as like, I don't want to work with demons. That's like, there's something there for you.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when we unpack that, there's past life trauma. Maybe you worked with demons in a past life. Like there can be this like potent cocktail of things that's very alive in your shadow and very alive in your body from all of the religious programming and all of the past life stuff. And if you don't want to look at it, that's fine. But then don't you dare go attacking other people for what they choose to explore, because that's just silly at that point, because I have people come at me all the time and I'm just like, what do you think that you're getting from this? Like, what do you think, you're going to change my mind? You're going to come out a brand that's been built on radical honesty and divine darkness and truth, and you think that your opinion in my DMs is going to make me be like, you know what, you're right, let me just rebrand the whole thing. Like, it's
you're
so
right
silly.
You're right, let me shut the whole thing down. I will not be working with demons anymore. Your one DM has changed everything for me. Yeah.
Well, right. And so like I always say, if someone has not done their research on demons from like a wide variety of sources, not just like read the Bible, listen to religious, but like a wide array of sources. If you haven't talked to people who actively work with demons respectfully, I'm not talking about watching one TikTok video about someone who now is born again because they used to be a psychic and they got like, I'm not talking about that. If you haven't talked to people who actively currently work with demons in a respectful fashion, you have like, and not you, but a person has no idea what they're talking about, because their opinion on demons is not actually your opinion. It's regurgitated fear that now you're spewing at somebody else. If you haven't worked with them, met them, talked to people who work with them, done research, you have no idea what you're talking about. And so that's oftentimes the people that come at others the hardest. Like, you haven't done any of those things, so your opinion is not actually your opinion. It's regurgitated fear from the church and from wherever else. And that's what's wild to me, is like, we've been as a society conditioned to not think for ourselves. Free thinking has been demonized. Like, there's so much control and manipulation that we see. And so why wouldn't it apply to this arena? If we're going to start to flip over these rocks and start to ask questions and start to look at the world from a more critical, discerning lens, we have to do that everywhere, not just where we're comfortable, And so this is where I always say, when people are willing to actually confront the demon piece, whatever that means for them. For some people, they just march themselves down to the underworld and they're just like going straight for demons. For other people, it's like, it starts as a light contemplation, and maybe they follow my account, but they don't engage with anything. And they start to like, they think and they ponder and whatever. Like, when you can even start to contemplate that, like, that already is a massive shift toward sovereignty, because it's a shift toward free thinking. Now, I don't care if people don't like them. I don't care if people choose to not work with them. I don't care if I trigger people. Like, it doesn't matter. But what I'm doing is I'm getting people to start to think that maybe there's something beyond what we've been conditioned to believe. And that right there is a massive step towards sovereignty and freedom, whatever anyone decides. And so that often is why when people step closer and closer to demons, they step closer and closer to their personal power, because they're willing to turn everything on its head. Demons will shatter any illusions that you had about your life. Like when I first started working with them, the way my life is now, like they have dropped veils on everything. And this is part of the reason, again, why people have a bad experience. Like I have lost so many things, but also I've gained so many things, and anything that I lost was a distortion, a manipulation, and they will rip away anything that's not serving you. They will drop veils on the parts of yourself you don't want to look at, and the parts of your life you don't want to look at. They will force you to confront everything, because that is true sovereignty. And so when people are not ready, it's the same thing when we work with death deities. Like it's all fun and games until like shit actually gets lit on fire. The people are like, what? You know, like people
I was
like
just
the
gonna say that
aesthetic.
because people have mixed feelings about Kali as well. And a lot of people will talk about how, Kali ruined their lives. What did she, or did she just strip everything that wasn't serving you away?
Yeah. Right.
Because that's what her energy is
Right.
for. That's what it does. It's the tower in tarot. It's about taking down all the illusions so we can get back to the foundation and rebuild what was supposed to be there in the first place.
Right.
That's what I was just thinking. I was like, this sounds a lot like Kali. And
yeah.
people
And that's the
are
thing,
mixed
people,
on her as well. Yeah.
They like the aesthetic of it, or they don't do their research, or they aren't in the seat of their power when they do this. They just kind of like reach out to a being because they think it's going to be cool, or like they're interested without really understanding what they're signing up for. This is part of the reason why when we work with demons, if you want to create a pact with them or a contract with them, it's not actually about a binding agreement at all. The demons just want you to self-advocate, because when we can't clearly advocate for what we want, state our desires, claim our desires, and when we don't put our all into something and say, I am willing to do what it takes, I am willing to walk through the fire to get where I want to go, to become who I want to be, that's when shit feels crazy, because when things start to get lit on fire and we're like, we play victim, and the demons are like, what, you asked for this, you thought it was going to be easy, are you serious? Like, and so this is where like everyone wants the finished product. They want the 50K months in their business, they want the fancy house, they want the soulmate, they want this, they want that. Great, but like, what did you think it was going to be like to have those things? And part of that is like the wounded light. Just make a vision board, put the G-Wagon on the vision board and it's just going to be in your driveway. That's not how that works at all, especially if you walk a dark path. Like if we are of the death current, if we are connected to the underworld, if we have dark soul fractals, like your path's going to be a little bit more volatile. There is no affirmation in the world that's going to bring you to your desires. You have to clear shadow first. And for most people, that's volatile. And when we don't take radical responsibility, we feel like we are a victim to the lessons and experiences that these beings bring into our life. We're not a victim. We asked for something, which means that we are putting our ass on the line and we are saying, I am willing to walk through the fire to be who I need to be to have the thing that I want. And that is the purpose of working with demons.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. I remember when I first heard you on a podcast. So I think that this is one of the most important types of discernment that people need to build, is that difference between being triggered because it's something you need to look at and feeling uncomfortable because it is out of alignment or it is toxic or there's something actually wrong. And I remember listening to you on a podcast and I was like, the first half of it, I was like, this makes me wildly uncomfortable. I was like, this is not like, I wasn't like, this is bad. Like people shouldn't do this. I was just like, I do not like this. And by the end of it, I was like, I am going to have to work with her. Because I realized listening to you speak, like I was uncomfortable because there was something that I needed to look at, not because it was actually something I needed to avoid. And I purposefully follow accounts in all areas of my life, like social justice, spirituality, all different accounts that consistently trigger me in that way, because it helps me practice that. Wow, I feel really triggered here. Okay, like take a couple of breaths. What was actually said? Was it really about me? Why am I uncomfortable with this? And it gives me that ability to practice growing. If we just avoid everything that makes us uncomfortable, there's a reason it makes you uncomfortable, and that reason is sitting in your shadow. But
Well,
you have
right.
to know the difference, because otherwise you get wrapped up in cults and
I
bad things
completely
also.
agree. And this is where we have to be present with ourselves. So if you're an avoidant person and you just run from the things that scare you and bother you and you're dissociated, you're not connected to your body, that discomfort is going to be really hard to navigate. And sometimes it isn't super clear when there's someone saying something and we can't tell, like, why does that make me uncomfortable? But we have to be willing to unpack that. And so again, like with that wounded divine spectrum, like unfortunately society tends to swing really like hard in opposite directions. So like, just a couple decades ago, there was no awareness around mental health at all.
Right.
So like everything was really toxic and really traumatizing, which is why we see all the ancestral trauma and everything that's going on in our society today. But unfortunately, the shift that's happening in some areas and some facets of society, we're swinging too far in the opposite direction and saying no one can be.
Okay. Do you remember where you were?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
So I was
good.
saying society tends to swing really hard in opposite directions. And I think
Yes.
to some degrees we're going too far, because now in response to a world that used to have no mental health awareness or resources, we've swung so hard in the opposite direction of I can never be triggered ever again. And it's the world's responsibility to walk on eggshells around me so that my nervous system is regulated. Fuck no. It is your job to heal your trauma. Your trauma is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And obviously, I understand there are varying levels of access. Like there's a lot to unpack, and that's not the purpose of today's video. However, when we take the attitude of the world owes me something, the world has to walk on eggshells around me, I can never be triggered again, we carry that everywhere. And we don't want to look at things that are uncomfortable. And we get mad when other people or accounts or things trigger us because we don't have the tools to understand what's coming up for us. A trigger is an invitation to go inward. And so if something is making you uncomfortable, that is your chance to sit with that and to understand what that is. And sometimes the answer is not always obvious. Demons will trigger the absolute shit out of you. That's the point. And sometimes they'll do it just to teach you emotional control, just to teach you not to betray yourself in the moment, just to teach you to speak your truth even when your nervous system's a little bit activated, and even just to teach you that sovereignty is not letting other people push your buttons. When I first started working, my very first demon, he would step through other people to trigger me. And all of a sudden, like all this shit was happening. People were like coming at me, and I was just like, and like it was making me want to like fly off the handle. And it was wild because in that moment, I was like, oh my God, I'm giving my power away. If I just like unleash on this person because they pressed a button, like I'm gonna take a moment and pause. And sometimes telling someone to fuck off is actually you being in your power. And sometimes it's not. And this is where we have to slow down and be really present. But when we decide in that moment, is that worth my time and energy? Is that how I want to proceed? That is sovereignty, because you're choosing from a conscious place instead of from a reactive place or from a shadow place. So working with demons is not easy because they will throw you into the fire. They're not going to hold your hair, hold your hand and tell you everything's going to be fine. They're going to throw you into situations to practice, to build the resilience and the energy to cultivate that strength that you need for the things that you want. Because whether you want a soulmate or a penthouse or a 50K month business or whatever it is that you want, it's going to take a different version of you, not a better version of you, but probably a more resilient, more conscious, more grounded, more whatever version of you. And the process that they have you walk toward that allows you to become the version of you that can actually hold on to what it is that you want.
Well, it makes me think about that. I cannot remember who said this. If anybody watching knows, please put it in the comments. I will have to find it later. But there is a psychologist who talks about between a stimuli and a reaction, there is a pause. And in that pause is your moment to make a different decision. And what shadow work and the demons and however various healing modalities can do is extend that pause for you. So you have more time between the trigger and the reaction to make a different decision. And I am somebody who still occasionally does, but used to have a very like minuscule, there was almost no pause for me to step in and make a different decision. And it took a lot of shadow work and a lot of inner child work and a lot of nervous system regulation to learn to, I'm going to be triggered. A regulated nervous system is not about always being calm. It's about having my nervous system activated and being able to bring it back to where it should be. And it's about being able to make a different decision even when my nervous system is activated. And that requires you to clear the shit in your shadow And then it requires you to practice. And so working with demons has been one way. I'm sure you see this with all your clients, is one way to do both of those things. Clear the stuff so that you have more space between the stimuli and the reaction. And then the demons are like, great. Now that you've had more space, practice. Practice making a different decision.
No, that's just it. And so to be clear, these beings do operate within your window of tolerance, and they stretch your capacity. So you may be at your fucking edge, but you're still within that window.
Yeah.
So like when I first started working with them, I was uncomfortable every single day. And I realized that my perception of safety and comfort prior to the demons hinged upon my ability to avoid the things that dysregulated me, such as I would people please, I would self-betray. So I had the perception of regulation, but I was dysregulating myself in other ways because it was causing me pain to betray myself like that. And so what they were showing me was like, you have this illusion of safety, you have this illusion of regulation, but you're doing other things that are causing problems for you. And so it's not like they just lit my life on fire, like straight out of the gate. Like they will not, especially if you're, because I'll have people who've had a lot of trauma and they're afraid to be re-traumatized. Demons are not going to re-traumatize you. They're not going to be like, oh, you want to manifest a new house? Let's burn this one down. Like that's not at all how they operate, unless you are someone who like needs that or wants that. Like I've met people who are like, I'm willing to walk through whatever, and the demons are like, all right, well, we can just burn this down and that's faster. And like they're never forcing anything on you that you really don't have the capacity to handle. Their goal is to not traumatize you or re-traumatize you. So like oftentimes they stretch your capacity. So like when someone's been working with them for a long time, the kind of like experiences and lessons and trials and tower moments, the magnitude is so much greater because the person's cultivated so much resilience to be able to navigate that, but they're not just like straight out of the gate, like, it's just coming at you full force, because for most people that wouldn't be helpful. And I've even seen them turn people away. I've seen them be like, you're in too delicate of a state. Even our presence would just traumatize you because of the mini towers and the mini triggers that it would draw into your life. They're like, work with this other angel first, or work with this other deity first. And cultivate a little bit of, because if you're a really delicate, overly sensitive person, like sometimes the demons are like, you need like a prerequisite before you enter our world. But one of the benefits of it is because they're divine darkness, they hold a very different frequency. They don't feel like angels. But again, if we don't take an extremist view of this, that doesn't mean that their vibration is bad or low. It's not necessarily high or low. There's so much depth. There's so much nuance to all of this. They are divine darkness. So their frequency is a little bit more dense, but that means that they're a lot more grounding. So if you tend to be a really airy person, if you tend to dissociate or like live in your head, their frequency is going to pull you into your body, which is the only way we can really tap into deeper levels of intuition and discernment, which is the only way we're able to slow down in those moments that you were just talking about. And so they really help shift everything for you. But one of the biggest mistakes people make is because of this dichotomy. People think that they're evil and possess people. And then the other wounded aspect of it is demons are a quick route to money and fame and all this stuff. Like, no, neither of those things are true. What they really want to do is help you cultivate the tools and the awareness and the strength and the personal power to have what you want. Because most of the time what we want or what we have is just a window into the level of personal power that we've acquired. So you can't manifest for shit if you can't hold on to money for shit, if you can't be visible in your business. Like that's showing you a degree of personal power that you have yet to attain. And so like the phrase step into our power, it has become such like an airy buzzword. Like it's really not that simple. The things that we have to do to heal our power wounds are like intense, And so I blame that a lot on the wounded light, because we've talked so much about the wounded darkness and the chaos in the world. Like we have a spiritual awakening and we wake up to the darkness, the terrible things that go on in the world, the way human beings torture and kill each other. We're like, oh my God, that's evil. Darkness must be evil. And we like put it all in a box and we run toward the light. And so most people, when they have a spiritual awakening, they're coming from some kind of religious background. And if you're not running straight toward the darkness in spite of the church, usually you wake up and you run straight toward the light into a very wounded light energy, because that's a vibrational match for the wounded light of Christianity or of religion or whatever. And so people run straight into these communities that paint this really airy fairy picture around what it is like to manifest or to walk the spiritual path. Like we are not light. We don't embody more light by wanting to be light or by leaning into the things that make us light or by like
Mhm.
having rose quartz in our bra. Like, that's not what makes you light. What makes you actually light, because light is just consciousness. What
Mhm.
makes you light is going into the darkness and expanding your consciousness to be able to hold more light. That's all it is. And so what happens is people run into these communities and they are brainwashed into thinking that all they need to do is meditate more, or have more crystals, or make a vision board, or do this affirmation, or pray to this deity. And it's like, that's not actually what's going to get you what you want. Like, if you're not willing to get your hands dirty, your life's not going to change.
Yeah. Wounded light is really one of my can't think of the word I'm looking for right now, but really one of my things. I'm like, wounded light is causing so many problems
Mhm.
for especially women, but and society as a whole. And it is a direct cause of so many of the problems we face as individuals, as societies. It is the direct cause of like the wars that are going on in multiple regions right now, like the bypassing to say, well, I just need to know that's not my reality, or I'm too ascended so I can maintain my peace. Like, if you're human, you should be affected
Yeah.
by bad things that are happening in the world, and your ability to stay neutral and positive, not that again, this is about regulus, you should be able to feel it and then return to some state of neutrality so that it's not destroying your life every moment of the day.
Because that doesn't help either. When
Right, but
people
if
are like
you
twisted, that
right,
is not solving anything.
right, but if you can't feel that in the first place, that's why this is happening, is because so many people can stay neutral to the atrocities in the world and just turn a blind eye to it, that it allows for it to continue. I mean, it's a real problem.
Yeah. No,
Wounded light
it
is a
really is.
real problem.
And that's
It's what
what's so
allows the wounded darkness to continue to exist in the world.
1000%. The wounded light hands the mic to the wounded darkness.
Yes.
Because if we want to pull up and not look at things because we want to be too
Mhm.
evolved or too whatever, like
I
never
know.
feel, people convince themselves like, I'm never going to feel rage again because I've ascended. Like, give me a break.
Right.
You're in a fucking meat suit. It was built to feel rage. Sometimes you're going to get mad. Like,
Yeah.
like, we are also here, in my eyes, for some of the carnal things. Like, we're here to
Mhm.
experience rage and lust and desire and all the things, because we're here to have a complete and full human experience,
Yes.
not just pull up out of the shit that triggers us or makes us uncomfortable or whatever. But the wounded light turns a blind eye to everything going on, and it perpetuates the wounded darkness, which is how
Mhm.
everything becomes really polarized.
Yeah.
And we have to bring ourselves back to the middle. And what's interesting is that, like, working with demons, it really helps people do that,
Mhm.
because it shows you that, like, the darkness is not at all what you think it is.
Yeah.
The divine dark beings may operate differently than the light beings, but in some ways they don't. Like, there are some angels that are far more sarcastic than some demons. Like,
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
not that cut and dry. And
my
this is where
experience with the demons has been exceptionally compassionate because that was what I needed from them at the time.
exactly.
And
Yep.
so you had helped me heal enough of this past life stuff and karmic stuff that by the time it was like, okay, it's time to meet them, they were exceptionally compassionate
Yeah. Oh,
because
same.
that's what I needed. And
Right.
I wasn't approaching them like
The
with
way you did in
Solomonic
past lives.
magic, which is what I
The way
actually
you did in past
want to talk
lives.
about next.
But, like, the one thing I will say is, like, when I met them by accident. So I literally, normally when I go into shadow work or any kind of meditation, I would set an intention, and that particular day I didn't. And I, went through my normal process to get myself into theta brainwave state, and my soul came up out of my body, and this hole opened in front of me, and I just, like, was free falling through darkness and landed. And when I landed, I was on this red carpet in this, it was wild. It was like almost like a cavern, but it was like the cross between a cave and a nightclub. And there was like just like luxurious shit, red velvet. And I was on this carpet, and like in a horseshoe fashion, there were all these beings that looked like demons around me. And in that moment, I will never, this was one of the most profound moments of my entire life. I will remember this until the day I die. I, in that moment, felt so much love from them. And in my soul, I felt like I missed them so much. I burst out crying. And at that point, I had like, it's still a very wounded, uh, a wounded masculine type of relationship with my emotions. Like, I hated crying, and I was bawling my eyes out. And I was like, I feel like I miss them and I want to hug them. And like, my human self was like, what the fuck does any of this mean? It was wild. And they they were so patient because at that point I wasn't like fully, I was still in like a lot of trauma. My life was really volatile. And so they kind of just like lightly held down the fort for a little bit, protecting
Mm-hmm.
me, waiting until I was like actually ready. And they stepped in. And when they did, everything changed. They pulled me away from like a very psychically abusive ex-mentor who was super vampiric, psychically attacking our community. Like so many veils dropped, but they made sure that I was ready. They set up my business in a way
Mm-hmm.
that would support me through those things. Like they had me so hard. So like I know that I'm talking a lot about like the volatility with them, but when you cultivate a deep relationship with them, one of mutual trust, respect, and love, like they will have you harder than any being I've ever worked with. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
Hades is my patron. Like, it's the same thing with him, but like the underworld beings, it's just like a very ride or die energy. Like, they will have you through those things, and the
Yeah.
level of love and support that I have
Mm-hmm.
felt through some of the most difficult moments of my life. And to be clear, them stepping in did not bring the difficulty. I
Yeah.
was in it, but I was blind to it. And they illuminated the things I needed to see to extract myself from the things that were destroying me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like the ultimate expression of love. Like they saved my life, truly.
Yeah.
And so I want to make that clear because there's a reason why they operate the way they do. And when things get volatile or chaotic or whatever, people freak out because we lose sight of like what they're actually doing. And it can be scary
Mm-hmm.
when these veils drop and we have to see things that we were unwilling to see, but this is all happening for our highest good, and they will have you. They're not going to just be like, oh, lighting your life on fire, see you in 6 months, good luck. Like it's not like that. They're very present, but we also have to connect. They're not going to like chase you and make sure
Mm-hmm.
that you're okay. Like you have to go down there to the underworld and connect with them, but the process really is so sacred.
Okay, so so I want to talk a little bit more about Solomonic magic and how you
Mhm.
work with them differently, because then I want to
Yeah.
get into some of the malevolent entities stuff
Okay.
also before we run out of
Yeah.
time.
Yep. Okay. So my process of working with the demons was taught to me by Hades and the Goetic infernals themselves. So when I work with anyone who wants to work with demons, the first thing we do is go into the shadow. And most of the time, the first thing we do is not just run straight toward demons. Because if you are walking any kind of mystical, occult, spiritual path now, if you're awake in the world, in the way, the way the world
Mm-hmm.
is right now, you are probably a fairly old soul, which means that you've probably crossed paths with demons before, which means you might have worked with them, which means that you might have worked with them in unfavorable ways or left off not on a great foot. And so what that can do is create karma or just kind of like strained relationships with them. Like if you really did something that pissed them off in a past life, or if that relationship got severed, if your soul unconsciously has some kind of wounding because there's some misunderstanding, if you unconsciously feel unsupported or unsafe with them because you misunderstood some of the lessons in past lives, like all of that has to be rectified first, because our conscious mind is only about 5% of our brain. So consciously, if you feel like you're ready to work with demons and you feel excited about it, we don't know what's in your shadow. So I always start by taking people through the lives where they've worked with demons or had any kind of past life demon experience to understand like where their shadow actually sits in that realm, because we can
Mm-hmm.
consciously think we're fine and unconsciously have a ton of fear around different things that have happened. So we have to clean that up first, because what happens is when we approach the demons and there's unconscious fear, we leave room for an entity, a vampire, like something to step in front of the demons and weaponize the loaded gun of fear or
Mm-hmm.
panic or whatever is there. So that's always step number one. And then once that's been rectified, we go down to the underworld and we help facilitate the process of meeting a demon or whichever infernal wants to essentially work with you. Now, sometimes there's definitely something in here. Whenever I have this like weird, it's when my breathing shifts, like because you heard me like lose my air, I was just like, there's something that stepped into this room. Um, so whenever we go down there, we either choose the one that we want to work with or we let them choose us. And usually there's a main guide facilitating that process, just like I'm facilitating from the 3D, the person's patron deity or whatever is there to help kind of walk through that process. And we help facilitate the meeting of that. And then the demon will share what they want to help the person with, what they're going to help them with, and manifest or heal or whatever. And then we let the demon take them through their shadow. Like, let's say someone wants to manifest money, there's probably a decent amount of like money wounds and trauma and things, like, so you're probably going to work with a wealth demon. And my God, hold on. I don't know what's happening right now. you're probably going to end up working with a wealth demon, and they're probably going to take you through some money wounding, some trauma, some scarcity stuff. And then eventually they're going to help you with that manifestation. But this is not like a quick, oh, let's just do one ritual and then boom, money comes tomorrow or in 3 to 5 business days. Like, that's not my style. Because what I tend to find is people come to me who've worked with demons in other ways. Sometimes they fucked around with Solomonic magic and found out. Other times they've just petitioned them with a ritual. And I'm not saying that doesn't work, but it leaves a lot of room for assumption. If you create an altar for a demon that you've never met in the astral, and you've never engaged with them in any capacity, how connected do you feel to that being? How much do you trust them? Do you understand their personality? Like, if you're asking them for something and then you're just sitting and waiting, do you have any action steps? Do you have any guidance? Do you even know what you're supposed to be doing to facilitate that? Probably not. And then if something shifts in your life, is it a tower moment? Is it the manifest? Like, there's so much room for error. And that's part of the reason why people will also have a bad experience with demons, because they're not cultivating that relationship. And most people who come to me having worked with them ritualistically or in other capacities, when I take them through my process, they're like, oh my God, this is so different. Like, I get to know them. I'm building this relationship. Everything's more clear. I'm not making assumptions. There's no gaps that we have to fill in. And then they're also expediting the manifestation process because the demons aren't cutting through all this shadow to bring you what you want. You're like meeting them halfway. And so my process is always around taking people into the shadow, because it allows people to feel safer and it allows us to not make assumptions. If you petition a demon and something happens in your life, well, is that an entity? Is that like, we don't know unless we are going down there. So whenever people are especially actively in a manifestation process with a demon, I tell people, go down to the underworld, go connect with your demon. If you're moving through a manifestation, if you're healing something, if they're triggering you, like, we need to know what that is. Are they triggering you because they want you to grow? Are they trying to show you something? Are they triggering you because like a wound that you're trying to heal in your shadows being activated? Like, we don't want to make assumptions. So connecting with them is so, so important.
Okay. And that's different from Solomonic magic, which I don't really know anything about, but that's more like
Solomonic magic is like you're setting up
like a trap. And
like, so here's the thing. Like, I am not bashing people who work with demons ritualistically. Like, as you know, I had a conjuring program, a spirit conjuring program that was like just, fun for October. And so there are safe and respectful ways to conjure demons that don't involve Solomonic magic. So to briefly explain that, when we conjure a spirit, we cast a protective circle. And that circle doesn't necessarily push out the way like a banishing circle would. It's a circle of space that almost draws the line for a meeting to take place. It's much like if you were to have a meeting in the corporate world, there's going to be a boardroom. The boardroom is that sacred circle. Like, you're creating that space where a negotiation is going to happen, and you're inviting the being to step forward. And they may be like, nah, pass, I don't want to come. Or they may be like, you know what, work on your skills, I'll see you soon. And they may not successfully come. The difference between that and Solomonic magic is when you're doing Solomonic magic, you are setting up that circle, but then you're setting up some kind of like triangle or trap outside of the circle to force the demon to appear. And it's usually very uncomfortable for them. And they're bound within that triangle. And then they're bound to do whatever it is that you want them to do. And the triangle is outside of the circle, as if somehow it's going to be terribly unsafe for you to be in close proximity with them. Whereas a respectful, friendly conjuring, you're bringing the demon into the circle with you. And in my method, we're not pulling them here, we're going there. Because in my eyes, let's say someone wants to work with a high level coach, or they want to hire a high level attorney for something that they're moving through with court. You're not going to call up said the number one lawyer in Manhattan and be like, I need you to come to my house next week. You'd be like, fuck off. What, So when we're approaching somebody who has a lot of power, we want their help. It's kind of imperative to respectfully do it on their terms. And in my eyes, that's going to them. That's going down to their palace, allowing them to welcome you. You're in their domain. So instead of yanking them up here and being like, go do this for me, we're going down there and we're saying, hi, nice to meet you. I want to build a relationship with you. I want to get to know you. And also, here are the things I'd like your help with. That's very different than like ripping them here and just being like, go do this for me. And that's really what Solomonic magic is. It forces them here, whether they want to be here or not. And then you're making them your bitch. You're making them go do whatever you want them to do. That doesn't end well. If you want to make a new friend, you're going to be like, come to my house next Thursday, or else they're going to be like, get away from me. It's not how we build relationships. So in my eyes, I'm like, if you're practicing that kind of magic, knowing that it's really forceful, are you like that everywhere in your life? Because
I know like it makes people feel safe, which I have a separate thing for that. But it makes me kind of think about like genies and like fairy tales, and how like if you don't ask the question just exactly right, then like something horrible happens to you. Because they like basically trick you or whatever. And not that demons are like tricking people, but like it kind of makes me think of that, where like if you're using Solomonic magic and you're like, I want $50,000, and so they have to bring you $50,000.
They're going to take the fastest route to do that.
Right.
So if you're forcing their hand, they're going to be like, what's the straight shot so that this shit is over? You know what I mean?
Like it's not going to be like for your best good. It's not going to be
yeah.
like the way you envision it. It's just like with a genie. If you ask a genie for $50,000 and then you find out that like they gave you that and I don't know, like
because
your
you
house
total
down
your
or
car and get like an insurance
exactly, right,
reimbursement.
because like something
is
horrible
that how you want that to go? Probably not. And so when my method of working with demons can still be very rapid, but to some degree will take a little bit longer, because it's like if you go down to them and you approach them and you're like, I want $50,000, they're gonna be like, all right, well, you need to hold on to fucking 500 first. Like, here's what we're going to do so that you can safely build the capacity to hold on to the thing, because having it and losing it is arguably worse than never having it at all. And so when we go down there, they're going to be like, okay, well, stop betraying yourself. Here's what you need to do. You need to hold on to this amount of money first so your nervous system can get ready for it. We're going to clear these things in your shadow so that when eventually the 50 grand comes, it comes in a way that's really aligned without traumatizing you, and also in a way that you can hold on to it so that it's not slipping through your fingers like sand. Whereas Solomonic magic, you're going to force them to bring it to you as fast as possible, but it's probably not going to be in a way that feels good at all. And there's no relationship cultivated. There's no trust cultivated, because it's all fear-based. And then that's probably how you live your life. If you're approaching a being terrified, and you're probably unconsciously terrified of what you're also asking for, is that how you live your life? Like, that has to feel like shit, right? You know? Like, to move through life like that. And so my method, it forces you to face those fears first. You're going into their domain. You're going into their palace. You're directly, your energy field and their energy field, like there's 3 inches between you two sometimes. So it's like that, it's forcing you to confront all of that so that it doesn't get in the way later. Because like the level of trust I have in these beings was only cultivated by doing that. Not by keeping them at arm's length and binding them like there's some kind of rabid animal, like by going there and letting them show me that it was safe. And they understand that. There were demons that are like, I want to build a relationship with you. What do you need to trust me? What do you need in order to know that I will always show up for you? And I'd be like, $500. And they're like, done. 24 hours later, something would happen. And so like they do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah.
To build that trust. But if you're not engaging with them in that way, it leaves a lot of room for assumptions and a lot of room for errors. And then if you have your own personal entities and vampires and all this other shit in your field, forget it. Like everything gets really distorted then. And that's when people, again, have a bad experience, because they have actually no idea what's going on.
So that's why I want to talk about malevolent entities. I heard a woman talking on a podcast, and it was not about demons. It was about ceremonial magic, but because anyway, they came up. And she had said that if you're going to work with demons, you needed to use a Solomonic magic, because that was what protects the practitioner. And she was saying, so people throw it out. What I assume she's seeing is people throw out Solomonic magic, not do all the shadow work, not understand malevolent entities, and then have wished they had the protection that the Solomonic magic is supposed to provide. So I think we've already covered one of the reasons that people have, in quotes, bad experiences is because your shadow is throwing a wrench into the whole thing.
Yep.
But I also want to talk about malevolent entities, because I think that people, as I think you already mentioned, people take the word demon and put Goetic infernals in the box, and also actual malevolent things in the same box, even though they should have separate boxes.
Well, so here's the deal with that. When we follow a ceremonial magic ritual or Solomonic magic, you're specifically conjuring that demon because you are using its N and its sigil, and there's a whole process. And here is actually the thing that you're pulling here, where sometimes they swing really hard in the opposite direction and they throw out any and all processes and safeguards. They don't put up any protection. They're just like, demon, you know. And then so what happens is when we're not specific, it does leave a window for something else to step in. So sometimes a malevolent entity will step in, or a vampire will step in. And when this happens, I see those beings try to look like a demon. And so the very first time I decided to approach the demons, it actually was really impulsive. And I'm really glad this happened, because I broke all my own rules, which is why I fucking have these rules when I walk other people through it. And I was going through a terrible time in my life. I was in my Saturn return. I was being brutally psychically attacked by a malevolent vampire. I had no idea what was happening. Everything around me felt like it was crumbling, and I didn't understand why. And I got so fed up. I was like, you know what? I'm not even afraid of the chaos that demons will bring me. My life is bad enough. It can't get any worse. I'm just going to go right down there. And so instead of going through my past lives, doing all the
Mm-hmm.
things, I marched myself down there, didn't put up protection because it was just like a very like, fuck it energy, went straight down there. And as I was approaching them, out of the right side of me, this giant black entity that tried to make itself look like a demon, it had these like little horns, came and launched itself onto me and attacked me. And that was one of the most uncomfortable feelings it was a combination of like sheer terror and panic and all this low vibrational energy hitting my field, and I felt like I was like in this energetic void. It was insane, and the demons were just standing there just like, what the fuck is she doing? It was so bad, but I'm so grateful for it because it showed me they didn't do anything. They didn't attack me. That was not on them. But it's like if my gifts weren't developed via shadow work, if I wasn't clairvoyant, I would have been like, I approached demons and got smacked with this energy. Like I wouldn't have been able to see and discern what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
But because I can see so well from all of the shadow work I've done, I was able to understand exactly what happened and then where I fucked up. No protection, didn't go into my shadow. So like I didn't understand that there were things in my shadow that still had the frequency of fear. There were past lives
Mm-hmm.
where I misunderstood what happened. It left a lot of room for that thing to come at me. And so if I had taken away the wrong lesson, I may never have worked with demons, because I would have been like, they attacked me. I can't believe it. They're evil. That they didn't do anything, but they also let me learn my lesson. Don't be stupid when you come down here. You know what I mean? And so, because like normally I'd have Hades meet me and I just like went for it. And so that showed me a very powerful lesson. That brutal experience was not at all because of the demons. And that's
Mm-hmm.
never happened again because I've cultivated a process to prevent that. But when we throw any and all processes and safeguards in throwing out Solomonic magic, again, we swing too hard on the opposite side of things. And our energy field is just so open. I had no protective cloaks on. I had nothing on. What did I think was going to happen? You know, like, and so it's like when we swing really hard and we're too open, that leaves room for something else to step in. And if someone already has a malevolent attachment, that attachment's not going to want you to step toward demons, because they're going to help you release that attachment, because they're going to help you
Mm-hmm.
step into your power, your vibration, and your personal power is going to increase too much for that thing to continue feeding. So oftentimes people get attacked by shit that's already attached to them. And that needs to be dealt with first too. Like when people do long-term work with me, the first thing we do is a clearing, because we can't do shit until stuff's out of your field. And as you've seen, we peel back layers.
Yeah.
So it's not like all of it's removed in one fell swoop, but we remove a lot of shit that would cause problems later on.
So tell people what these entities are in your, like, just give them like the super quick 101 on that for anybody
Yeah.
who doesn't always thought that that was a demon. So now what are we talking about now? What is an entity?
Yep. So an entity is a low vibrational spiritual being. They vibrate at a very, very low frequency, which is why oftentimes when they're in our field or they step near us, it feels like panic, anxiety, fear, dread, like we're feeling the energy that their frequency carries. They're parasitic though. They feed off of us, but they're born out of the collective shadow. Earth is dense. It's very karmic. These things run rampant here because they can. And so they feed off of our wounded darkness. They feed off of our fear. They anchor into parts of our shadow, and then they feed. And so when they attach, they feed and they pull our frequency down to a lower state. And they also drive things that'll perpetuate that state. So if you have an entity that's hooked into like overthinking, they're going to lower your frequency and drive those thought patterns. Like, and they're just doing what they're designed to do. It's like when a tick is sucking our blood, like that's not good. But at the same time, like we're not going to say it's evil. It's just doing what it's designed to do. Like that's just how they are. But they drive a lot of problems for people. And the more ancient and the more malevolent they are, like that's when people start to get into like possession like symptom territory.
Okay.
There's also vampiric spirits that are not quite the same, because those are not necessarily born out of the collective shadow. They're entirely different spiritual beings that are, I mean, they operate much like vampires in pop culture. Like they drain our energy, but it's different because they kind of cast a wider net, so they'll attach to people and feed through that person off of the masses. Whereas entities are more often concerned with just the one person. But this is the reason why people have a bad experience in spirituality. They do an ayahuasca ceremony, they see their fucking entities, they freak out, they don't understand. Like we open ourselves up too quickly, we go too deep too fast, we meet these things, we don't have the tools to deal with them. That's why I do what I do, because like darkness obviously is very nuanced. So we need to understand, like, is this a malevolent entity? Is this that? And so when we are unpacking these things, when we're untangling these things from our energy field, we're able to actually fully step into our power, because oftentimes they drive us to perpetuate the patterns that are keeping us stuck, that are keeping us in chaos, that are keeping us traumatized. So when we release these things, our vibration is able to ascend and we're able to claim our power and actually our sovereignty.
Okay. So I have like a quick myth busting section, and then we're going to talk about your Defense Against the Dark Arts program, which I think you
Okay.
still have available, right? Because
Yep.
people, it is a great program to help you get rid of all that shit that we were just talking about.
Yep.
But you can answer these as quickly as you would like. So,
Okay.
true or false, fact or fiction? Demons are not for beginners, because we hear that a lot too in the spiritual community. Like, those are for advanced practitioners.
This is not black and white. There are people
Most of these won't be.
yeah, right. So I will be concise, but it's more nuanced than true or false, as
Mhm.
you know. So yes and no. There are some people, like if you literally just bought your first crystal yesterday and you don't know jack shit about spirituality, demons is not step one. Going into your shadow, meeting your other guides, like that's step one. Doing a clearing, etc. But there are people who, you know, because advanced is subjective, right?
Mhm.
Like, so there are people who I demon step forward for in our work, and I'm like, oh wow, shit, that feels like a little early. But like, I'm not driving that. The guides are. So if they think that someone's ready for it, they're ready for it. And that's where having a mentor is really powerful, because that
Mhm.
person there is going to facilitate the introduction of beings that the mentor has already connected with. But there are times where people are beginners in this life, but their soul is really ancient and they need to wake up fast to that, and they need powerful beings to step forward. So it's not really a beginner or advanced thing. It's more like, are you actively traumatized or not? Because if your life is on fire and you're in a terrible situation, shadow work is unearthing trauma. So like, that's probably not the time to
Mhm.
like unearth more. Like, you should be in a relatively stable place or resilient enough to move through shadow quickly enough to get yourself out of that. But it's up to the demon. Like, the demons are never going to work with
It's
someone
up
that's
to
not
the
ready.
demon.
It is.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not
Mhm.
sure, go approach them. They'll tell you if you're ready or not. They'll be like, you're a train wreck. Come back in 6 months and do these things. Or they're going to be like, we can fix this. Like, it's
Yeah.
really, they know better than any one of us.
Mhm. Okay. Now, I think we covered this already, but I also heard on a different podcast, again, they're talking about Solomonic magic, but she very specifically said that she wasn't telling people not to work with demons, but that there are all these other spirits that she said are more amenable to human interaction, and that people should just work with those. So,
It's interesting because I think that when people work with demons ritualistically, they're not really getting to know their personality. You're not building that
mhm,
trust and feeling that love. Because when I go down to the palace, sometimes they're like pouring me a martini and we're sitting at the bar, we're chatting, we're talking, we're building a relationship much like you would with a friend. They're highly amenable to human interaction. Many of them
mhm.
love. Like, when I held my Manifesting with Demons masterclass, the night before I held the masterclass, I went down to the palace and they were like decorating the ballroom. And I was like, what are you guys doing? They're like, we're getting ready for everyone to come down here tomorrow. Like, they were so excited. So it's, again, going into the unconscious mind removes the blinders, the
Mhm.
limitations of just doing things in that 5% of your conscious mind. You're able to see and experience more. So I argue that if someone's not doing shadow work with demons, if someone's not traveling down to the palace, like, they're missing out on a huge aspect of their personality. Demons are blunt. So if you summon them and they're very concise and they're blunt and like they're not really there to like hang out with you, part of it's because they're not comfortable here. You're dragging them to our realm, and it's not comfortable for a spirit to gain foothold here when they don't want to be here. So they're
Mhm.
going to be blunt, they're going to be concise, they're going to be like very business like. When you go down there, you're in their territory and they're like, it's so different. So if you haven't done that, then people have no idea what they're missing.
Okay, so then fact or fiction, working with them long term can cause some sort of like negative buildup in your energy field. This is something I've heard too, that like people who work with demons long term, like it seems to like cause this buildup of stuff in their energy field, or it starts to slowly attract bad things into their life. Like,
I find that interesting because the everything that I've worked with demons, with my own personal practice and with my clients, the demons have helped clear out a lot of stuff in the energy
mhm,
field. And part of that, though, is you have to be willing to look at that stuff. So it's like, if you want demons just because you want a fast route to money and you don't want to have to like remove any entities or whatever, like, there's no cutting corners with them. So there's not negative buildup, but when people use them inappropriately, you may potentially incur some negative karma. If you're using them without wanting to do the shadow work and you're not clearing entities and things, like anything can cause negative buildup. Just
mhm,
stagnant energy can cause negative buildup. But if you're working with them appropriately and they're helping you become the version of you that you need and want to be to have the life that you want, it's going to actually be harder for anything to build up in your field.
Mm-hmm.
And then the life falling apart thing is like, if you've kicked the can down the road for your tower moment, it's going to come back around hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's going to happen with or without demons, but it's probably going to happen a little harder with demons if you're avoiding necessary volatility for growth.
Yeah. Well, and I would, like, we've already talked about wounded light. Like, I would argue that if you're refusing to do any of that clearing, you're refusing to look at any of your shadow, and you're just working with light beings, that's where we get that like wounded like weird ascension.
I've seen
spiritual psychosis stuff.
Yeah. I've seen way more malevolent entities on people like that than people who fuck around with demons. Yeah, because like there's a level of empowerment that has to happen for you to even approach the demons. Mm-hmm. And the wounded light space is where, again, like that weird psychosis, culty energy, like there's so much shit there.
Yeah.
So much shit.
I know.
That's, you know.
All right. 2 more. These ones will be quicker. Does everyone have a demon on their spirit team?
In theory, yes. But there are people that will never wake up to spirituality. Mm-hmm. So they're never going to meet their guides. That doesn't mean they're not there. Your guides are gently nudging you, and what you do with that unconsciously is up to you. Yeah. But yes, most people do have them there. They can choose not to ever work with those beings. Just like, you know, I don't work with galactic beings. Are they on my team? Yeah, probably. But like, it's just not aligned for me at this point. Mm-hmm. So it's something that I don't touch. That doesn't mean that they're not there.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other one you hear all the time is like, demons require worship. Like they require you to worship them. And like it's some old school version of the word worship, which of course all of us like in the spiritual occult spaces are like, ooh, worship, because of all of our religion wounding.
Yeah. Well, so what's funny about that is that to a degree is bleeding over from religion. Mm-hmm. It's like pedestalizing a deity. Now listen, be respectful to the beings you work with, but they don't want to be pedestalized. They don't want you bowing down to their altar. They want you to worship your fucking self. Most of the time they're like, I don't want anything from you. I want you to connect with me, because that's actually you devoting yourself to you and your path. Now, if you're asking them for big things, they're going to want some nice shit. They might want, you know, some nice wine. They might want some top shelf whiskey if you're asking them for these things. But usually that comes after like long-term manifestations are being discussed. They really want you to choose your own power. And sometimes they will ask for things. Like if they're going to send you on a wild goose chase to go get something from the food store that's not in season, they're doing it for a reason. Not because they want to be difficult, but they want to see how bad you want it. Because if you can't go find a pomegranate out of season, then like how badly are you going to push forward on your path when things get inconvenient?
You know, it's interesting that when people are working with demons, they call that worship. But if you were working with a light being who really wanted a pomegranate out of season, that's just an offering.
I think that a lot of this is like the sell your soul programming. Yes. You know what I mean? A lot of it's that. And it's like, I think people have this like dark culty vibe where they think that people are like sacrificing animals. Like that's not fucking at all what like that's not what happens in the darkness. Like that's not, you know. Yeah. But it's interesting because I think that a lot of this too is like they want the continued consistency. Going down to the underworld or setting up an altar for them is not worshiping them. It's building that mutual trust and respect, but it's showing them that you're serious about whatever it is you say you want. Because if you want, let's say $50,000, but you can't find 5 minutes a day to meditate with them, how consistent are you going to be able to manage that? Like it's about putting you into the habit of doing these things. But I argue that like, because I don't feel like I worship any of my deities. I love them. I respect them, but I'm not pedestalizing them and bowing down as if they're saving me, because I'm saving myself. They're just illuminating the path forward. They're walking with me, not above me.
Yeah, I agree. Vast majority of the time when they ask me for something specific, it's like, we need you to be consistent with your workout routine for the next month. Yeah. Like I should have been doing anyway to feel good for me, you know, like it's not.
Right.
Anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. So tell us about Defense Against the Dark Arts and anything else that you want to tell us about, because I've been through that program and it was quite powerful. So
Defense Against the Dark Arts was born out of one of the worst moments of my life, because I was getting brutally psychically attacked by a mentor that I really, really trusted. And it turned my whole life upside down. And the demons had stepped forward and pulled me out of it and showed me my power through all of that. And so the program is the culmination of everything I've learned across years of doing entity clearings and vampiric clearings and dealing with brutal psychic attacks and things like that. So the program is amazing for wherever you are on your spiritual journey, whether you're advanced, whether you're a beginner. It's the shit I wish I knew when I stepped into this realm. realm. And
Mhm.
it's the shit I wish I knew about psychic attacks. Because when we think of psychic attacks, when we take a wounded light approach, we think like that would never happen to me. I'm too high vibe. False. Just because you think it hasn't happened doesn't mean it's not going to. And I always say like the worst time to learn how to deal with something is when shit's on fire. Like, is that
Yeah,
when you're going to
yeah.
find out how to use a fire extinguisher, or was that when you're going to go look for it because you don't know where it is in your house? No, that's when you already should know how to deal
Mhm.
with these things. So it's like when you're getting psychically attacked, that's the worst time to figure out how to deal with it. So even if you think that that's not something you've experienced, it's better to have the tools that you're not going to have to deploy, or to then be able to deploy them in an emergency later on, than to be like, oh, I'll see what happens. But what it ultimately does is clears out your field and keeps your field clear. It shows you how to prevent attachment, because we think that when we're high vibe enough, nothing can attach. And that's also bullshit. We're human. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. When we peel back layers of our shadow, we peel back layers of attachments. It clears everything out, preventing future attachment, clearing out things that open the door for attachment, showing you how to protect yourself against psychic attack, because there is a lot of vampiric mentors in the spiritual space, and that's
Yeah.
by design, because vampires drive these people to places where people are traumatized and codependent, because that opens you up to vampirism. And so this program is the full solution, so that you don't have to go clear yourself or book a clearing fucking every other week because you're just getting attacked all the time.
Mhm.
That's number one. I also have a ton of different demon programs. I have a demon membership. So for people who are looking to potentially facilitate a connection with them, they are welcome to reach out, and we can kind of point you to the resource that we think would be best
Mhm.
wherever you are on that journey.
Excellent. So tell people where to find you, and I will make sure all the links are below as well.
Awesome. So I am most active on Instagram. My handle is the Underworld Queen. That will be in the comments. And then I also have a
Mhm.
website, KristenRamezzana.com, that has most of my programs. That's in the middle of being updated. So there'll be more stuff added to it as we go. But yeah, Instagram is usually the place to find me. I also have a podcast called Awaken the Witch, talk about a lot of cool
Mhm.
shit on there. You'll hear a lot about my own personal demon experiences and things like that.
All right, so I really hope you enjoyed this interview. If you are interested, definitely check out Kristen's podcast, check out her Defense Against the Dark Arts program. All of her links are in the description. Don't forget that my program, Reclaiming Eve, is open. We're going to be starting that in January. If there's anything in this interview that you have questions about or you would like to us to expand on, go ahead and throw those in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.